10 years. I'd waited a damn long time for this day. My knees were screaming, pressed into the unforgiving chill of the polished marble floor. I bet you could find dust from the last administration in the cracks between these tiles. Ethan Thorne, director of the Commonwealth Blackguard, the Empress's personal, off-the-books problem solver, was kneeling here, listening to my boss give her 10th annual performance review. A performance review from hell. On the throne above, the woman herself, Evelyn Sterling, tapped a perfectly manicured finger on the armrest. Top, top, top. Each one was a little hammer against my sanity. She wore her usual uniform, a ridiculously expensive black gown embroidered with a golden eagle, the sigil of her dynasty. She was a beautiful woman, no doubt. Before she took power, she was the star of every blue blood bachelor's fantasy in the capital. Now, her face was so tight you could use it as a cornerstone for a new federal building. The iced chips scraped off her Coachella glass of whiskey. Ethan, she began, her voice still smooth as honey, but it was honey laced with arsenic. It's been 10 years, hasn't it? I kept my forehead pressed to the floor, rolling my eyes where she couldn't see. 10 years exactly, Madam Empress. Give or take 3 days. My voice was so steady it impressed even me. 10 years. She drew the words out, theatrical. The tribal chiefs in the northern territories, those secessionist holdouts in the southern swamps, and of course, the loyal senators in Olympus who spent their days calling me a tyrant and their nights plotting my downfall. Oh, and let's not forget my dear siblings, who had such unfortunate accidents involving boating trips, experimental medication, or sudden, stress-induced heart attacks. With every item on her list, my eyelid twitched. Who did she think arranged all that? Who walked through fire and waded through blood? Every dirty, dangerous, soul-crushing job fell on my desk. And when the dust settled, the victory was her brilliant leadership, and the sin was Ethan Thorne's ruthless efficiency. Fina, a tool has to know it's a tool. All in a day's work, ma'am. I mumbled into the floor, my forehead throbbing. I was used to it. This woman used me like her favorite scalpel, but when the surgery was over, she looked at me like a bloody rag she couldn't wait to incinerate. A day's work? She laughed. It was a crisp, clear sound that made the hairs on my neck stand up. Beside the throne, her ancient aide, Mr. Finch, looked like he was trying to retract his head into his collar. But Ethan, she leaned forward slightly, and the scent of her expensive, bespoke perfume, sandalwood and something cold as a tomb, washed over me. I can't shake this feeling of unease. When you sit where I sit, the greatest fear is the one you create yourself. The wolf you raise by your side, the one that never gets its fill and is always looking at your throat. Here we go. The speech she'd been rehearsing for a decade. Today was the day she finally pulled the trigger. As if on cue, old Finch, his hands trembling slightly, brought over a small, crystal tumbler on a silver tray and placed it on the floor in front of me. The liquid inside was a deep amber, like a fine single malt. A sweet, peaty aroma crawled into my nostrils, making my head spin. Top-shelf stuff, both the whiskey and the poison mixed in it. Guaranteed to be quick, quiet, and untraceable. The best money could buy. I stared at that glass for a long 3 seconds. Whatever embers of loyalty might have been lingering in my soul finally sputtered out and died. Fine by me. You have served me well, Ethan. Evelyn's voice floated down, dripping with a condescending, false magnanimity. I remember everything. Today, I reward you with a clean death. A final shred of dignity. Do you have any last words? Words? Oh, you have no idea. I snapped my head up, staring straight at her. She seemed taken aback, probably not expecting a dead man walking to have such a fire in his eyes. Then I burst into tears. I mean a full-on, gut-wrenching, snot and tears everywhere sob. Wasn't even fake. A decade of stress, paranoia, and thankless murder found its release valve, and the floodgates opened. Oh, Madam Empress. I howled, banging my forehead on the marble for effect. I've been waiting for this day. I've been waiting for this day. I've been waiting so long. Evelyn's practiced compassion froze on her face. Finch nearly dropped his little feather duster. I kept wailing, my voice echoing through the grand hall. 10 years. An entire decade. I haven't had a full night's sleep or a decent meal. By day, I'm dodging assassins, and by night, I'm planning how to stop other people from becoming assassins. I'm 28. Look at me. I gestured wildly at my still decent hairline. I've got the stress lines of a 50-year-old accountant. I'm more tired than that time I had to fight off rebels for 3 days straight in the Badlands. Evelyn's lips moved, but no sound came out. She was at a loss. I seized the moment, snatching up the glass of poison whiskey like it was the Holy Grail. Tears splashed into the amber liquid. Your generosity. I am overwhelmed. This blessing. This glorious blessing. I let out a loud, hiccuping sob. I mean, it's not for you, obviously, you've got all. But me, all I ever wanted was to go back to the Southlands, take over my dad's portfolio of boring real estate, and become the kind of trust fund degenerate who gets written about in the gossip columns. And now you've finally granted me my retirement package. With a severance. Dignity. I raised the glass to the ornate ceiling, a toast to my impending life of lazy, consequence-free debauchery. To the Empress. Long may she reign. I'll drink to that. You can. Do whatever. And before either of them could react, I threw my head back. Wait. Evelyn shot to her feet, her voice cracking. Too late. I drained the glass and slammed it onto the marble, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. Then, with a final, dramatic thud, I pitched forward and lay motionless. The hall was dead silent. After what felt like an eternity, Finch tiptoed over, extending 2 trembling fingers toward my nose. Nobody's. He turned back to the throne and gave a slight, solemn nod. I lay there, holding my breath, slowing my heart to a crawl. The turtle technique. The Blackguard's ultimate survival skill, a way to fake death. Never thought the first time I'd use it for real would be in front of the boss. I heard Evelyn let out a long, heavy sigh, the sound of 1,000-pound weight being lifted from her shoulders. The rustle of her gown told me she was descending the steps. She stopped beside my corpse. Take it to the incinerator. Make sure it's a clean burn. Her voice was back to its usual ice-cold monotone, with an undercurrent of disgust. The ashes, final landfill. Don't pollute federal property. Yes, ma'am, Finch replied. Footsteps receded. A heavy door opened and closed. I waited another 10 minutes, long enough for the rats to get brave again, before I took a massive, life-giving gasp of air. My lungs burned, but my heart felt lighter than it had in a decade. I wanted to laugh until my ribs cracked. I scrambled to my feet, dusted myself off, and stripped off the black uniform of the director. Underneath, I was already wearing a simple, gray tactical suit. I walked over to her desk, dipped my finger in a stray inkwell, and grabbed a sheet of her gold-crested official letterhead. My handwriting was a furious scrawl. To the Empress, it's been a slice. Consider this my 2-week notice, effective immediately. P.S. I've deducted a decade's worth of overtime, hazard pay, and therapy bills from the slush fund. Don't thank me. You'd have just wasted it on another marble statue of yourself. Your former employee, Ethan Thorne. I left the note right under her heavy, obsidian Commonwealth seal. Then, I slipped out of the hall like a ghost. I knew every shortcut, every blind spot in the security system. Hell, I designed most of them. First stop, the Treasury. I used a custom-forged key I'd kept hidden for 10 years and a memorized map of the secret vaults. I bypassed her personal stash and went straight for the good stuff. Bearer bonds, jewels, and gold ingots. Anything valuable and untraceable. I packed it all into a massive duffel bag. It was heavy, but it was the weight of a multi-generational retirement. Next, I went to the Blackguard's deepest communications hub. I released 13 messenger birds, each carrying a unique, prearranged signal. Within the hour, 73 of the best agents in and around the capital, the ones I knew still had a conscience, or were just as burned out as I was, simultaneously vanished from their posts. They left only one thing behind, a small copper coin stamped with a single word: retired. Finally, I made my way to the city's most discreet storm drain outlet. I took one last look back at the imposing, soul-eating architecture of the Capitol building, silhouetted against the night sky. So long, you crazy witch, I spat, hefting my retirement fund onto my back. I bent down and slipped into the dark, damp tunnel. Let someone else work the graveyard shift. I'm finally going home to be a playboy. The Thorne Estate at Haven Springs in the Southlands. I was soaking in a natural hot spring, steam curling around me. On a small table sat a bucket of iced champagne and a bowl of fresh fruit. Kneeling beside the pool was Sophia Wallace, daughter of the richest magnate in the region. Her delicate fingers, usually reserved for painting or playing the piano, were carefully peeling grapes and placing them in my mouth. Franklin, my family's cheerful, portly butler, shuffled over with a silver tray. On it was a thick stack of papers. Master Ethan, the latest news from Olympus, and more resumes. I lazily picked up the top sheet. It was a wanted poster. The sketch artist got the jawline right, but the eyes were all wrong, too menacing. They hadn't captured my newfound aura of profound, deep-seated laziness. The bounty was obscenely high, stamped with the Empress's big, red seal. It looked angry. TSK, TSK. Evelyn's a bit upset, is she? I flicked the poster into the hot spring and watched the ink bleed into the water. Too little, too late. Franklin chuckled. Indeed, sir. In our family's businesses, the hotels, the shipping depots, the warehouses, they've seen a lot of new faces asking questions these last few weeks. The remnants of the blackguard are running around like headless chickens. Of course they are, I said, opening my mouth for another grape from Sophia. The boss just discovered her lead developer absconded with the source code, the client list, and the final project payment. She's entitled to be a little frantic. Let her search. I glanced through the resumes. It wasn't just the 73 I'd brought with me. All across the country, low-level agents, retired vets, even some disgruntled Army officers were sending feelers. The message was the same. Boss, you hiring? A gig with you beats working for the government. I grinned. Tossing the letters aside, I pulled Sophia closer and looked at Franklin. Go on, send a message to my dedicated, if misguided, former colleagues. Franklin bowed. Your instructions, sir? I drained my champagne flute and gazed at the picturesque mountains in the distance. Tell them to stop wasting their time. The pittance the Empress is paying them isn't worth the shoe leather. As of today, their salaries, their bonuses, their hazard pay. Ethan Thorne is picking up the tab. On one condition, I added, my smile tightening just a bit. They have to actually want a new life, not just be sniffing around for their old boss. The ones who pass muster get good Southern food and all the bourbon they can drink. The ones who don't. I didn't finish the sentence. I just squeezed the grape I was holding, crushing it. Purple juice, dark as dry blood, trickled through my fingers. Franklin understood perfectly. He bowed again and left. Sophia snuggled against me, her voice a soft murmur. Ethan, darling, aren't you afraid? What if the Empress sends the army? I leaned down and kissed her forehead, inhaling the clean scent of her hair. I sighed in contentment. Afraid? I chuckled, watching the steam blur the distant peaks. I worked her Black Ops division for 10 years. I know which of her maids talks in her sleep and which security guard has foot odor. I know how much is in her emergency funds, which military units are actually loyal enough to deploy, and where her supply depots are better than she does. Right now, I said, toying with a lock of Sophia's hair, my eyes narrowing, she shouldn't be worried about how to catch me. She should be worried about how many little surprises I forgot to disable in the Capitol building before I left. She should be worried about whether she'll find a few extra pins in her pillow when she goes to sleep. Besides, I stretched, splashing water everywhere. Being a playboy is the life. Teasing the local gentry, racing cars, listening to music, charming, beautiful women. When I'm bored, I count my money. When I'm really bored, I cause a little harmless trouble. You think she'd trade her throne for this? Outside, the sun was bright. It was a perfect day in the Southlands. As for the sleepless Empress back in Olympus, not my problem. I was retired. Your salaries, I'll pay them. Franklin scurried off, looking like a cat that had just lapped up a bowl of cream. I knew that when my message got out, it would send shockwaves through the underworld and the corridors of power alike. The Empresses want a poster? Hell, it was too stiff to use as toilet paper. The sketch looked less like me than one of those cheap caricatures you get at street fair. Sophia's fingers paused in their grape peeling. Her long lashes cast shadows in the steam. Ethan, she whispered, her voice like silk. That's a bold thing to say. But she's the Empress. She controls everything. I squeezed her soft cheek. The texture was exquisite. Controls everything? I scoffed. The chair she's sitting on? My father secretly bankrolled her father's coup to get it 10 years ago. 5 years ago, after her older brother had a sudden illness, I was the one who personally cleared the way for her to take it. If my family had been a little more ruthless back then, the Thorns might be the ones in charge, not the Sterlings. It was treasonous talk, but here in my hot spring, I was king of the world. Sophia wasn't some childhood fiancée arranged by my long-dead parents. She was the safe harbor I'd sailed for the moment I went rogue. Her father, the wealthiest man in the Southlands, was a shrewd operator. He wasn't a fighter, but he knew which horse to back. When I showed up on his doorstep with a duffel bag full of gold and a nation-sized target on my back, the old man just sized me up for a moment before lending me his precious daughter and this entire estate to relax. A smart man. Don't worry, I said, pulling her closer and breathing in the faint gardenia scent of her perfume. If there's one thing I'm good at, it's staying alive. A decade of working for her didn't teach me much, but the arts of self-preservation and causing massive headaches are practically etched into my soul. Just then, the faint sound of hoofbeats echoed from beyond the estate walls, growing closer, followed by the soft, sharp sound of steel being drawn and a few muffled shouts. It was my perimeter team, my former Blackguard colleagues. Sophia tensed up. Showtime, I grinned, patting her back. Looks like the entertainment has arrived. Sophia, darling, be a dear and fetch that bottle of 10-year reserve bourbon I buried under the old oak tree. Your man needs to celebrate. She gave me a worried look, but nodded, wrapping a silk robe around herself and padding away like a startled deer. I slowly climbed out of the spring, toweled off, and slipped into a loose-fitting, embroidered silk robe. I slid my bare feet into a pair of wooden sandals and clip-clopped my way to the open-air pavilion overlooking the lake. A couch and a small table were already set up, a fresh pot of tea steaming on top. The hoofbeats stopped at the main gate. A tense voice, Franklin's, carried across the courtyard. Gentlemen, to what do we owe the pleasure? My master is resting and prefers not to be disturbed. Resting my ass, a coarse voice barked back, laced with the particular arrogance of the Capitol Guard. We have a warrant from the Empress to apprehend the fugitive Ethan Thorne. Hand him over now, and you might avoid being charged as accomplices when we burn this place to the ground. TSK. Evelyn worked fast, sending the Capitol Guard. She must be desperate, skipping all pretense of subtlety. I picked up a teacup, blew on the surface, and called out, Franklin, it's a hot day. Don't leave our guests standing in the sun. Invite them in for some iced tea. There was a moment of silence from outside. They clearly hadn't expected me to be so cooperative. Soon, the heavy tread of armored boots echoed into the pavilion. A squad of about 20 Capitol Guardsmen stormed in, their armor gleaming. The leader, a captain with a face like a bulldog, scanned the area until his eyes locked on me. I was sprawled on the couch, my robe half open, my hair still dripping wet, the very picture of a decadent recovering. Playboy. You're Ethan Thorne? The captain demanded, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The one and only, I said with a lazy smile. You boys have come a long way from Olympus. All for little old me? A man who was officially declared dead and given a state-sponsored cremation? What are you planning to do, flog my ghost? The captain's face darkened. Cut the crap. The Empress has declared you a traitor who has defrauded the state and absconded with treasury funds. You're to be taken back to the capital immediately. Come quietly, and we might go easy on you. Defrauded? Absconded. I cleaned my ear with my pinky finger, looking utterly innocent. Sir, you must be mistaken. The Empress herself rewarded me with a clean death and a glass of her finest poisoned whiskey. Her aide, Mr. Finch, was a witness. I call that dying in the line of duty. As for the treasury funds, ah, you mean the golden bonds? That was my severance package, my retirement bonus. I left the company. I took what was mine. It's standard practice. My twisted logic made a vain bulge on the captain's forehead. Nonsense. Seize him. His men roared and started to move forward. Hold on, I said, setting my teacup down. My voice wasn't loud, but it stopped them in their tracks. I lazily raised an eyebrow at the captain. What's your name, Captain? How much does the Capitol Guard pay you? 100,000 a year? Enough to cover your mortgage in Olympus? Kids' college tuition taken care of. My barrage of personal questions seemed to stun him. He answered instinctively. I am Captain Marcus Wolfe of the 7th Battalion, and my salary is none of your business. Captain Wolfe? I nodded, pulling a few thick stacks of bearer bond from a drawer in the table beside me. They were for 10,000 each. A captain, that's what, a mid-level position, with hazard pay and benefits. You're lucky to clear 150 a year? In a city like Olympus, that's barely enough to keep a family afloat. I tapped the bonds against my palm. So here's the deal, Captain Wolf. You and your men have had a long, hot ride. I'm a reasonable man. The Empress sent you to arrest me. That's your job. But I happen to like being alive, so I have no intention of going with you. Wolf's eyes narrowed. You don't have a choice. Easy now, I said, holding out the bonds. Here's 50,000. Split it amongst yourselves. That's a couple of years' salary for each of you. Take the money, go back, and tell your superiors that the treacherous Ethan Thorne was tipped off and fled. You found the estate empty except for a few servants. Simple. The guards stared at the bonds, their eyes wide. For them, it was a fortune. Wolf swallowed hard, but he stood his ground. Thorne, do you think you can bribe officers of the Commonwealth? We are loyal to the Empress, not your money. Loyal? I laughed, and this time the laugh was cold. Captain Wolf, do you even believe that? Your commander, General Wallace. You know, the one skimming off the top of the defense budget and selling surplus weapons to the northern tribes? I have a copy of his offshore account ledgers in my study. And his deputy, the one with the secret second family down in the warehouse district, his kid is about to start kindergarten. Does the Empress know about that? The color drained from Wolf's face. Of course, I'm not interested in airing their dirty laundry, I said, pushing the bonds forward again. Take the money, file your report, and we all go about our day. Or, I drew out the word. All around the pavilion, in the bamboo groves and behind the rock gardens, dozens of figures materialized out of the shadows. They were dressed as gardeners and servants, but they moved with a predator's grace, and they weren't holding rakes and shovels. They were holding military-grade crossbows, the tips of the bolts glinting with a faint blue sheen. Poison. Or, I continued, picking up my teacup again, you can test whether your swords are faster than my gardener's crossbows. I really hate violence, but if someone insists on interrupting my retirement, I suppose I can make an exception and get my hands dirty. It's been a while, after all. I'd hate to be out of practice. The air grew thick and still. The only sound was the wind rustling through the bamboo leaves. Sweat beaded on Captain Wolf's forehead. His eyes darted between me, the bonds, and the silent, menacing crossbows. The men behind him were practically statues. Finally, Wolf stomped his foot in frustration, snatched the bonds from my hand, and shoved them inside his armor. He ground out the words through clenched teeth. Ethan Thorne. You live up to your reputation. Men, we're leaving. Without another word, he and his squad beat a hasty, undignified retreat, moving much faster than when they had arrived. I watched them disappear, then gave a slight wave. The gardeners melted back into the shadows as if they'd never been there. Franklin trotted over, his usual cheerful expression back in place. Dealt with, sir? Yep, I said, stretching. Easy enough to handle when they're desperate. A little cash, a little blackmail. It always works. But I looked toward the distant capital, my expression hardening. That was just the first wave. Probing the defenses. The real trouble is coming next. Evelyn has more than just a few corrupt guards in her playbook. You are a master of strategy, sir, Franklin said admiringly. Strategy my ass, I chuckled. I am annoyed. I just want to be a lazy degenerate. Why is that so hard? Sophia returned, carrying a small, earthen jug still flecked with fresh dirt. Ethan, I brought the bourbon. Is everything all right? Everything's fine, I said, taking the jug and prying off the wax seal. A rich, intoxicating aroma filled the air. Just a few buzzing flies. They've been swatted. Come, Sophia, have a drink with me. Let's toast to our peaceful life, however long it lasts. I poured her a glass and filled one for myself. The amber liquid swirled invitingly. Oh, and Franklin, I said, taking a sip. It was smooth, complex, and magnificent. Get a message to our people. Wolf's failure means Evelyn will send someone more competent next time. It might be her pet project, the owls, or maybe some freelance mercenaries. Tell our guys to keep their heads down, but not to be cowards. If anyone starts causing trouble on my turf, they don't need my permission to clean up. I made a sharp gesture across my throat, then broke into a wide grin. After all, I'm a playboy now. It would be bad for my reputation if I let just anyone wander onto my property. Franklin took his leave. Sophia leaned against me, whispering, "Ethan, are you really not scared at all?" I put my arm around her, watching the setting sun paint the lake in hues of gold and crimson. Scared, I drank my bourbon slowly, feeling the warmth spread through me, chasing away the last of the day's chill. What good would that do? I used to be scared of her paranoia, scared she'd get rid of me once I was no longer useful. And what did that get me? A glass of poison. I'm not scared anymore, I said, turning to look into her clear eyes. I have money. I have people. I have an exit strategy. Evelyn Sterling can have her commonwealth. Ethan Thorne has his own little slice of paradise. She wants to drag me back and execute me? Fine. Let her try. We'll see what happens first. She finds all my little parting gifts hidden in her capital, or I fill Lake Viridia with her agents. If I'm going to be a playboy, I'm going to be the kind of playboy who gives her nightmares. That's where the fun is, right? I laughed and drained my glass. The evening breeze of the Southlands, fragrant with water and flowers, drifted past. Outside the estate, the currents of the underworld were shifting. Inside, the Playboys' party was just getting started. This retirement was turning out to be more exciting than I'd planned. I liked it. The cry of the owl. That Spring's Folly bourbon was the real deal. 3 glasses in, a pleasant warmth was spreading from my gut to the top of my head, making everything seem softer, warmer. Sophia, a lightweight, was flushed after just 2 drinks, her cheeks the color of peaches. She leaned against me, her eyes hazy, tracing idle circles on my chest with her finger. You couldn't trade this life for anything. Unfortunately, while the gods might leave me alone, the Empress would not. When Franklin's smiling, Buddha-like face appeared at the edge of the pavilion again, I knew my peace was about to be shattered. "Sir," Franklin's voice was low, his smile a little strained. "A message from Gray Falcon. A group from the north has arrived. Not official channels. They came by river, and they should reach Raven's Crossing, about 20 miles out, around midnight." Gray Falcon was one of my old assets, a mole planted deep within the river transport guilds. Low level, but he heard everything. "How many? What's their style?" I didn't move, my fingers still tangled in Sophia's hair. 15 or 16. They move like professionals, disguised as merchants, but their cargo barges are riding suspiciously high in the water. Custom built for speed. Franklin paused. The man in charge has the stink of the ice house on him. The ice house. That was our internal nickname for the Empress's other, even more secret intelligence unit. Officially, they were the Internal Affairs Division, but their work was filthier than anything the Blackguard ever did. They spied on officials, purged the court, and answered only to the Empress. Their leader was a shadowy figure named Director Cross, Evelyn's true right-hand man and the Blackguard's biggest rival. His agents were called the Owls, vicious, cunning, and known for their unorthodox methods. The Owls, huh? I clicked my tongue. Evelyn must really miss me. She's letting her prized attack dogs off the leash. Sophia shivered, looking up at me, the bourbon haze in her eyes replaced by worry. I kissed her forehead. "Don't worry. They're just attack dogs. They bark loud, but once you hit them hard enough, they learn to run." I sat up straight and told Franklin, "Pull our people back. Leave only a skeleton crew of lookouts at the estate. The rest go to ground, execute Plan 3, and tell the kitchen to prepare a feast tonight. The men could use a good meal to steel their nerves and to see our guests off." Franklin's eyes lit up. "You mean to say, sir, Raven's Crossing is a nasty spot," I said with a smile. "The river's fast, the woods are dense, and there's a foul mist at night. It would be a real shame if our guests, unfamiliar with the local terrain, were to have an accident, fall in the river, get bitten by a snake. As the hosts, it's our duty to give them a little help." "Understood, sir." Franklin's smile was back in full force, now tinged with eager anticipation. He bowed and left. "Ethan, you're going yourself?" Sophia asked, clutching my sleeve. "And do what? Get eaten alive by mosquitoes?" I sank back onto the couch, pulling her into my arms. "I'm a playboy now, darling. And a playboy's first rule is never to stand when you can sit, and never to do something yourself when you can pay someone else to do it. All that fighting and killing, so uncivilized." I said it with a smirk, but I still got up and walked over to my desk. On it, Among the usual mess of papers were several small porcelain vials of different colors, a few thin bamboo tubes, and a stack of specially treated leather parchment. I rolled up my sleeves and began to grind inkstone. I wasn't writing, I was drawing. With a few quick strokes, I sketched a rough map of Raven's Crossing, the waterways, the paths, the woods, the hidden sandbars. Then I took the vials and dotted colors onto different spots on the map. Red for flammable oil surprise, blue for paralytic mist, black for caltrops and pitfall combo, and yellow for, well, for a little something extracted from the southern swamps that tended to drive wild animals into a frenzy. When I was done, I blew the ink dry and wrote a few quick lines of code on the treated parchment. It was a set of instructions for the former Black R team leader who would be welcoming our guest tonight. It detailed timing, tactics, retreat routes, and the most important part, leave no survivors, but make it look like an accident. I sealed the map and instructions in a thin bamboo tube. Walking to the window, I let out a soft whistle. A moment later, a sharp-eyed, gray-feathered falcon landed on the sill. I tied the tube to its leg and stroked its head. "Go on, take this to Hawkeye." The falcon nuzzled my finger, then launched into the air, disappearing into the twilight. "There," I said, clapping my hands together and returning to the couch to embrace Sophia once more. All taken care of. Now where were we? Let's have another drink and wait for the show. Midnight. The estate was quiet, with only a few lights burning. The guards on patrol yawned as they made their rounds. But 20 miles away, at Raven's Crossing, it was a different story. Hawkeye crouched on the thick branch of an old tree, watching the waterway below. He'd forgotten his real name years ago. Now he was just one of Ethan Thorne's captains, the one who handled the dirty work. He held the thin parchment, covered in what looked like childish scribbles. He understood it perfectly. The Owl's boat arrived right on schedule. It was a sleek, shallow draft vessel that slid through the narrow channel like a water snake in the dim moonlight. The men on deck were dressed in black, their movements fluid, their eyes scanning the banks. They were cautious, but they were cautious of men, not of the natural traps their target had so thoughtfully mapped out for them. The boat entered a bend where the water seemed calm. The lead owl gave a hand signal, and the boat slowed, preparing to land. In that instant, a series of soft thwumps echoed from the woods on both banks, almost lost in the sound of the river. It wasn't crossbows. It was several clay pots, wrapped in pig bladders, launched from catapults. They landed perfectly on and around the boat, shattering and splashing a thick, sticky, black oil everywhere. "Ambush! It's oil!" the owl leader shouted. But it was too late. Flaming arrows whistled from the darkness, not aimed at the men, but at the oil. Whoosh! The river erupted in a wall of fire, engulfing the boat. The owls yelled in shock and anger as they dove into the water, their movements swift and disciplined. They thought the water would save them. They were wrong. The river wasn't deep, but the bottom had been prepared. The first few owls who hit the riverbed felt a searing pain shoot up their legs, poison-tipped caltrops. Their screams were swallowed by the crackling flames. Those who avoided the caltrops didn't get far before their limbs grew heavy and their vision blurred. The paralytic agent, colorless and odorless, was spreading through the water. From the woods, the glint of crossbows flashed in the firelight. Bolts flew with deadly accuracy, picking off the struggling figures in the water. There were no war cries, only the sickening thud of bolts hitting flesh and the muffled groans of the dying. The owl leader, the most skilled of them all, saw it was a lost cause. He summoned his energy, leaped from the flames, and used the burning hull of the boat as a springboard to launch himself toward what looked like a safe, grassy patch on the bank. His feet landed. Crack! A muffled thud and a short, sharp scream followed. The grassy patch was a camouflaged pit lined with sharpened bamboo stakes. The battle, or rather, the slaughter, was over as quickly as it had begun. Within minutes, the flames on the river died down, leaving only the smoldering wreckage of the boat. The air smelled of burnt wood and blood. A few bodies floated in the water. The sounds from the pit on the bank had stopped. Hawkeye slid down from his tree and gave a signal. Shadows emerged from the woods and began to clean up. Bodies were weighted with rocks and sunk into the deep part of the river. Bloodstains were covered. The pit was recamouflaged. It was professional efficient and cold. It was as if nothing had ever happened. Back at the estate, I was eating a grape from Sophia's hand when Franklin appeared and whispered a few words in my ear. I nodded and waved him away. Is it over? Sophia asked. Yep, I said, spitting out a grape seed. 15 came, 0 are going back. Raven's Crossing is a dangerous place. Sophia was quiet for a moment. Ethan, you kill them. What was the alternative? I asked, looking at her. Invite them in for a drink and try to convince them to be friends? Sophia, this is a kill or be killed game. They came here under orders to eliminate me. I just happened to be faster, smarter, and better prepared. I gently wiped a bit of grape juice from the corner of her mouth. Don't think about it. All you need to know is that as long as I'm here, this estate, this whole region, is your sanctuary. If the sky falls, I'll hold it up for you. She looked at me, her eyes a mix of emotions, and finally leaned into me, holding me tighter. Just then, a bright green flare exploded in the night sky to the southeast. My eyes narrowed. What's that? Sophia asked. A distress signal, I said, my playful demeanor gone. The highest level. It means an agent's cover is blown and their life is in imminent danger. Is it one of ours? She asked, her voice tense. It must be Swift, I said, frowning. Swift was my mole inside the Regional Textile Administration, a key post for monitoring the Southland's economy and official corruption. Her cover was deep. How could she have been compromised? Evelyn's retaliation was coming faster and from more angles than I'd expected. She wasn't just sending assassins anymore. She was using the machinery of the state to squeeze me, to cut off my network limb by limb. Franklin, I called out. He appeared almost instantly. Find out what happened, I said, my voice cold. I want to know everything that went down at the Textile Administration today. Now. Yes, sir. Franklin's face was grim as he hurried away. I stood by the window, staring into the dark sky where the flare had been. The southern breeze was still gentle, but I felt a chill. Evelyn was playing chess now. This was no longer a simple manhunt. It was a full-scale siege, and using the power of the government, with the full backing of the law, was her most dangerous move yet. Ethan, Sophia came to my side, her hand cool in mine. I squeezed it, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. It's fine. She wanted to play chess, I'll play. A decade in the Blackguard taught me how to counter, how to redirect, how to use my enemy's strength against them. She wants to use the law to crush me? Fine, I said, looking out toward the glittering lights of the city of Iridia, the heart of the Southland's politics and commerce. Frankly, I was starting to get bored just being a playboy anyway. Let's play a new game. Let's see. Political corruption, economic manipulation, destabilizing the state. No, wait. Let's see about helping the common folk, and in the process causing our dear Empress a few administrative headaches. This retirement was becoming more and more eventful. I wrapped my arm around Sophia's waist, my voice back to its lazy drawl. Come on, let's go to bed. Starting tomorrow, your man is turning over a new leaf. I'm going to become a proactive, civic-minded, and very, very troublesome playboy. First on the agenda, perhaps a social call on the regional governor, or maybe a friendly cup of tea with the heads of shipping and resource management. A playboy has to network, after all. The Swift's gambit. Franklin was fast. At dawn, a gray messenger bird landed on my windowsill. I unrolled the tiny, coded message from the tube on its leg. After reading it, I crushed the paper into dust between my fingers. Just as I thought, I said, my voice flat. Sophia came in with a bowl of hot chicken broth. Ethan, did you find out? Yeah, I took the bowl. The head of the Regional Textile Administration, a government appointee named Felix Vance, raided the Silver Loom Emporium yesterday afternoon. Arrested the manager and staff for trafficking in illicit goods. My agent, Swift, she was there, going over the books. The Silver Loom was one of Sophia's family's businesses on the surface, but in reality, it was one of Swift's primary intelligence hubs. Vance had been on our payroll for years, happy to look the other way for a generous fee. Vance? Sophia frowned. He wouldn't dare touch one of our stores. We pay him a fortune. Times have changed, I said, sipping the broth. It was warm, but it didn't chase the chill from my bones. The Empress is playing for keeps. A direct order from Olympus comes down, and a spineless sycophant like Vance is going to scramble to prove his loyalty. He wants to break Swift get information out of her that he can use to curry favor with the Empress. Then, Swift. Sophia's face went pale. She knew what happened to agents who were captured. The signal means she's holding on, for now. But Vance is a nasty piece of work. He knows 1,000 ways to make people talk. We can't wait. You're going to rescue her? Sophia grabbed my arm. It's a trap, Ethan. He's expecting you. And if you openly attack a government facility, it's an act of rebellion. I patted her hand. Who said anything about attacking a government facility? Or doing anything openly? I walked to my desk and laid out a fresh sheet of paper. The charge is trafficking illicit goods. It's a flexible charge, I said, slowly grinding ink. If it sticks, everyone involved is executed. But what if the evidence is faulty? Or what if the traffickers turn out to be someone else entirely? Sophia's eyes widened. I dipped the brush in ink and began to draw a simple floor plan of a mansion. This is Vance's private villa outside the city. The man is greedy. He's got enough stolen art, gold, and illegal bonds hidden there to get him executed 10 times over. I put down the brush. Franklin, I called. He appeared at the door. 2 things, I said. First, have our asset in the district attorney's office accidentally leak some evidence of Vance's corruption to that ambitious new federal prosecutor, the one who's looking to make a name for herself. Make it seem like a coincidence. Second, I tapped a few locations on the floor plan. Find a crew of professionals, fresh faces nobody can trace back to us. Tonight, I want them to pay a visit to Mr. Vance's villa. No killing, no fallos. I just want them to liberate a few items. The antique jade statue in his study, the property deeds hidden in his safe, and the collection of compromising letters he keeps in a lockbox by his bed. The ones detailing his correspondence with certain powerful figures in Olympus. Franklin's eyes narrowed to slits. Sir, is this a frame job or a warning? Both, and neither. I smiled. Vance arrested my agent to score points with the Empress. I'm just giving him a different way to do it. He thinks Swift is trafficking goods? I'm going to make it look like Vance himself is the one funding a high-end theft ring. When the prosecutor hears about the break-in and then coincidentally gets an anonymous tip that the stolen items were all proceeds of crime and blackmail. What do you think our friend Vance is going to prioritize? Pleasing a distant Empress or saving his own skin? Sophia gasped. You're turning the tables on him. If he's fighting for his own survival, he won't have the time or the resources to keep torturing Swift. He might even release her to try and appease you. Appease me, maybe not. But it will buy us time, I said. And it sends a message to every other official on my payroll in the Southlands. You want to betray me to get in Evelyn's good graces? You'd better make sure your own house is in perfect order. But what if he doesn't back down? Sophia asked. He will, I said with certainty. Men like Vance are survivors. The Empress is far away, but my knife could be at his throat by tomorrow. He knows how to do the math. Franklin left to make the arrangements. I sat back down and finished my broth. It tasted much better now. Ethan, you're... Sophia looked at me with a complex mix of admiration, dependence, and a faint trace of fear. She was realizing that the lazy playboy she knew was also a master of this dark, ruthless game. What? A monster? I wiped my mouth, my easygoing grin returning. Sophia, in this world, nice guys finish last. If you want to live a happy, carefree life, you have to be willing to be more ruthless than your enemies. I pulled her onto my lap. Don't be afraid. My ruthlessness is for them. For you. For your father. For my people. I'm the most loyal friend you could ever have. She relaxed into my embrace. That night, events unfolded just as I planned. Vance's villa was hit by a team of ghosts. They bypassed the security, took exactly what they were sent for, and vanished without a trace. Vance was apoplectic, but didn't dare report the full extent of the theft to the authorities. Meanwhile, the ambitious young prosecutor received a package of evidence that made her eyes light up. And in the city jail, the treatment of the manager of the Silver Loom Emporium suddenly improved. The interrogations stopped. She was given clean food and water. Vance even sent an aide to secretly give her medicine, with a message that it was all a terrible misunderstanding that would be cleared up soon. When I got the news, I was sitting with Sophia in a pavilion on the estate, watching the moon rise. Phase 1 is complete, I said, pouring myself a glass of wine. Vance is on the ropes, and Swift is safe for now. Next, we turn up the heat. What's next? Sophia asked. Evidence isn't enough. We need public outrage. We need to make this scandal so big that Vance can't cover it up. Tomorrow, I want you to visit the families of the textile workers Vance has ruined over the years. The ones whose businesses he destroyed, whose property he seized. Offer to fund their legal challenges. Tell them the Wallace family will cover all their expenses to file a class action lawsuit with the prosecutor's office. Sophia's eyes gleamed with understanding. With public support and solid evidence, Vance is finished. Not just Vance, I said, my gaze distant. We're going to use this to clean house at the Textile Administration. Put our own people in place. From now on, the flow of goods and money in the Southlands. That will be determined by us. Sophia looked at me and said softly, Ethan, this isn't what a playboy does. This is... What? I cut her off, tweaking her nose. Making money. Do you know how expensive it is to be a playboy? To keep my beautiful Sophia in the finest silks and jewels? This is just business. And in the process, if it causes our Empress a few economic difficulties, well, she tried to take my agent. I'm taking her revenue stream. It's only fair. The moon was high in the sky, casting a silver light over the quiet estate. A simple game of cat and mouse had just escalated into a full-blown economic war. And at the center of it all, the retired fugitive was comfortably leaning against his beautiful companion, plotting how to make the Empress's treasury a little bit lighter. This retirement was a lot of work, but it was fun. The Empress, the rain, and the playboy. Vance fell faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. With the prosecutor on a crusade, public opinion inflamed, and a few of his more incriminating letters leaking to the press in Olympus, the Empress had no choice but to cut him loose. He was recalled to the capital in chains, and the regional textile administration was completely restructured. The new director? A man whose career Sophia's father had sponsored years ago. A man who understood the concept of gratitude. Swift was released, bruised, but not broken, and went even deeper underground. The affair sent a tremor through the Southland's political landscape. Officials who had been wavering now firmly aligned themselves with the Wallace and Thorne interests. My network, my playboy empire, quietly extended its influence into shipping, resource management, and trade. Even the governor's mansion suddenly became a much friendlier place for Mr. Thorne. Life at Haven Springs became even more idyllic. Sophia's smile returned, brighter than ever. Franklin remained his cheerful self, but the estate's security was now so discreetly and lethally effective it was terrifying. I knew this peace was just the calm before a much larger storm. Evelyn was not the type to take a loss lying down. Her elite owls had been wiped out, her man in the Southlands had been publicly disgraced, and a significant source of her revenue was now effectively under my control. If she wasn't planning something big, she wasn't Evelyn Sterling. Sure enough, as the autumn leaves began to turn, a piece of news swept through the Southlands. The Empress was embarking on a southern tour. Officially, she was inspecting infrastructure projects and boosting regional morale. But the details of her trip told a different story. She was traveling with a small, elite contingent of her personal guard, and among her entourage was the one man I'd hoped never to see again in person, Director Cross. She's here, I said, lounging in a recliner, watching the golden leaves drift down into the courtyard. Sophia, who was peeling a fresh orange for me, froze. She came herself? Well, her minions keep failing, so the boss has to get her hands dirty, I said, picking up a slice of orange she'd dropped. It's fine. Save me the trouble of guessing what her next move is. Ethan, this is different, Sophia said, her voice trembling. She's the Empress. If she publicly accuses you, with the full authority of the state behind her, all your connections, your network, they won't dare oppose her openly. You're right, I said with a small smile, which is why she won't do it publicly. She'll try to get me into a private meeting, a place she controls completely. She'll use the law, tradition, and patriotism to try and break me, to force me to confess, to give her what she wants. And then, at the end, a quiet accident or another glass of poison whiskey. A neat and tidy solution. Then we have to leave. We can hide, Sophia insisted. And go where? I shook my head. The Commonwealth is vast, but her reach is long. I can't just run. What about your father's business? My family's legacy? What about all the people who have thrown in their lot with me? I can't take them all with me. Besides, I sat up, the blanket sliding off my lap. The usual laziness was gone from my eyes, replaced by a glint of cold steel. From the moment I drank that fake poison, I was done running. She wants a confrontation? She'll get one. This is my turf now. The day the Empress arrived in Viridia, a cold autumn rain was falling. She bypassed the governor's mansion and commandeered the regional federal courthouse, clearing out a 10-block radius around it. The entire area was locked down by her guards. The atmosphere was thick with tension. She didn't meet with any local officials. She didn't inspect any projects. That night, a silent, black-clad team, led by Director Cross himself, surrounded Haven Springs. They didn't storm the gates. They just formed a perimeter, a silent, menacing ring of shadows. Franklin came to me, his expression more serious than I'd ever seen it. "Sir, Director Cross is at the gate. He says he has a verbal invitation from the Empress for Mr. Thorne to join her. He brought this." He handed me a heavy, black iron token. On one side was a snarling wolf's head. On the other, the Empress's personal seal. It wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. I took the token. It was cold as ice. How many men? 12 visible. All of them elite. In the shadows. Impossible to say. But my men on the perimeter report at least 3 separate high-level operatives have us locked down. This is not a friendly visit, sir. Should I activate? No, I cut him off, tossing the token on the table. Tell our people to stand down. Go about their business. Take a swim, have a drink. Cross is inviting me, not raiding the place. Sophia, darling, help me get dressed. The flashiest suit I own, the one with the gold thread. Sophia bit her lip, but silently went to fetch it. It was an obnoxious crimson jacket and trousers, embroidered with ridiculously large golden flowers. It was tasteless, and it was perfect. I put on and looked in the mirror. Yep, that's the look of a true playboy. Gotta look the part when you're meeting the Empress. I opened the main doors myself. The cold, rainy wind hit me in the face. Director Cross stood there in the downpour, flanked by his silent, black-clad agents. He was older, his face smooth and unervingly placid, his eyes like a snake's. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice a smooth, chilling whisper. "Enjoying the country life, I see. An interesting choice of attire." "Director Cross," I said with a cheerful grin, bowing slightly. "So good of you to come all this way in the rain. An invitation from the Empress? Imaginative. Let's go. We shouldn't keep her waiting." A flicker of surprise crossed his face. He clearly hadn't expected me to be so compliant. "This way, Mr. Thorne." There was no car. We walked. The rain soaked my ridiculous suit, making the golden flowers look sad and tarnished. We walked through the empty, silent streets. I knew my people were watching from the shadows, but I didn't look. I just followed Cross into the heart of the heavily fortified courthouse. The main courtroom had been converted into a makeshift throne room. It was brightly lit, which only made it feel colder and more intimidating. Evelyn wasn't wearing her formal gowns, just a simple, elegant dark dress. She sat in the judge's high-backed chair, toying with a jade pendant. Cross melted into the shadows behind her. I walked to the center of the room and made a show of starting to kneel. "Don't bother," Evelyn said, her voice flat. "Ethan, the Southlands agree with you. You look prosperous." I straightened up, a wide grin on my face. "It's a great place to retire, Your Majesty. Thank you for asking, but you must be terribly busy. To what do I owe the honor?" She put down the pendant, and her gaze hit me like a physical force. It was pure, undiluted imperial power. "Prosperous? Ethan, if you're just a simple retiree, then there's no one busy in the entire Commonwealth. 15 of my owls, 27 freelance contractors, my administrator Vance, and his entire staff. All of their fates seemed to be strangely connected to a simple retiree." I blinked, feigning confusion. "Mom? The owls? Administrator Vance? I heard they had some unfortunate accidents or were brought to justice for their crimes. I've been right here, minding my own business, tending my garden, annoying my neighbors. I assure you, I know nothing about such important matters." "You know nothing?" Evelyn sneered, picking up a folder from the desk. Your agent Gray Falcon in the transport guilds. Your agent Swift in the textile administration. Your secret partnerships with the resource cartels. Your network of businesses, banks, and shipping lines that you've built through the Wallace family. A network that has its tentacles in every corner of the Southlands. Ethan, do you really think I'm blind? Her voice grew colder with every word until it echoed in the vast, empty room. For 10 years, you weren't working for me. You were using the Blackguard as a cover to build your own private empire. And now that you think you're strong enough, you want to break the leash and bite the hand that fed you. The pressure in the room was immense. I could feel Cross's eyes on me, ready to move. The lazy smile on my face slowly faded. I didn't argue. I just looked at her, holding her gaze until I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Then I let out a long, slow sigh. It was a sigh of profound weariness, of a man who had carried a heavy burden for too long. Your Majesty, I said, my voice quiet but clear. You're right, and you're wrong. I did use my position over the past 10 years to make arrangements, but I never intended to turn on you. I never wanted your throne. I looked her straight in the eye, because I was never playing for that. I was playing for my life, a chance to live like a man, not a dog waiting to be put down. I took a step forward. Cross tensed, but I just reached into the sleeve of my soaked jacket and pulled out an object wrapped in oilskin. It wasn't a weapon. It was an old, sealed letter. Does your Majesty recall what your father, the late Emperor, left behind on his deathbed? Besides the official decree of succession, I placed the letter on the cold stone floor. The color drained from Evelyn's face. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. You? How could you? She stammered. How could I know? I finished for her, because in his final hours, there was a third person in the room with you and your aide. A shadow agent. The one man the old Emperor truly trusted, tasked with recording his every last word. He didn't make it out of the room alive, but he managed to pass on what he heard, using the oldest, most secret method of the Blackguard. I pointed to the letter on the floor. And here is what your father really thought of your siblings. His suspicions about his sudden illness. His true fears for the future of the Commonwealth. It's not in order to disinherit you. He was too weak for that. But it's enough. I looked at her pale face. Your Majesty, I never built this network to start a rebellion. I built it so that when this day came, when you finally decided to discard me, I would have something to bargain with. So that I could sit across a table from you, not kneel at your feet waiting for a glass of poison. My terms are simple, I said, standing tall, the rainwater dripping from my hair. The Southlands. It's my sphere of influence now, not as a king, but as a businessman. You grant my associates and me the freedom to operate without interference, and you drop this manhunt. In return, the contents of this letter will never see the light of day, and my organization will never challenge your authority. I said each word with precision. We call it even. We stay out of each other's way. The courtroom was silent save for the drumming of the rain on the roof. Evelyn stared at the letter on the floor, her chest rising and falling rapidly. I could see a war of emotions in her eyes. Rage, humiliation, and cold, hard calculation. After a long, agonizing moment, she slowly closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were filled with nothing but exhaustion and ice. She didn't even look at the letter again. Ethan, she said, her voice hoarse, you win. Take your people, take your business, and stay in your damn Southlands, she said, waving a tired hand. Get out of my sight. Before I change my mind. I didn't pick up the letter. I simply bowed, a perfect, formal gesture of a loyal subject. Thank you, Your Majesty. Take care of yourself. Then I turned and walked out of the courtroom, into the dark, rainy night. Cross didn't move. I knew he would be the one to destroy the letter. A fragile, cold truce had been forged between me and the Empress. When I stepped out of the courthouse, Franklin and my men were there, instantly draping a dry coat over my shoulders. It's over, I said, my voice feeling distant. Let's go home. When we arrived back at Haven Springs, Sophia was waiting at the door. She threw herself into my arms, trembling. I held her tight, breathing in her warm, comforting scent. Is it done? She whispered. For now, I said, stroking her hair. For a long time, I think we can finally have some peace. A few days later, the Imperial entourage left the Southlands as quietly as it had arrived. The autumn skies cleared. The days grew crisp and bright. I finally began to live the life I'd always wanted. I spent my days racing cars, my nights at the opera. I hosted lavish parties, sponsored struggling artists, and used my immense fortune to solve petty local disputes in the most ostentatious ways possible. My name became a legend in the Southlands, a story of the playboy who'd faced down the Empress and won. As for the news from Olympus, the political intrigues, the border skirmishes, when those reports reached me, I was usually soaking in the hot spring, a glass of champagne in my hand. One lazy afternoon, Sophia leaned against me as we watched the boats on Lake Viridia. "Ethan," she asked softly, "don't you ever get bored?" I smiled, a real, genuine smile of pure contentment. "Sophia, my love," I said, looking out at the beautiful, peaceful landscape. "Boredom is the greatest luxury in the world. It means the sky isn't falling. It means our dear Empress is, however grudgingly, holding up her end of the bargain. To be able to live a boring life as a playboy, to listen to music, to count my money." I pulled her closer, whispering in her ear, "I wouldn't trade this for a throne." The wind carried the faint sound of music and laughter from across the water. This playboy's life was, after all, the only one worth living. They started calling me the king of the Southlands, the man who'd won his freedom with a ghost bluff. I liked the sound of that. I gave the storyteller who came up with it a bar of gold and told him to make it a multi-part epic to be told every night at the most popular tavern in Viridia. The more outrageous, the better. Paint me as the scoundrel who'd outsmarted the Empress just so he could sleep until noon. That reputation served me well. In the 3 years after Evelyn's disastrous Southern tour, I leaned into the role of the ultimate playboy. I'd rent out entire theaters just to hear a single soprano, or bankrupt a rival magnate on a whim by backing his competitor. I invented new, more complicated versions of poker, became the region's foremost authority on gourmet food, and made obscure artists into overnight sensations. Every one of my follies created ripples through the Southlands, fueling the economy and keeping countless people employed in my ecosystem of whimsy. My father-in-law's business empire, under my guidance, it flourished in the most unorthodox ways. We cornered the market on not just silks and teas, but also on exotic animal imports and, more quietly, on funding inventors working on things like automated looms and improved ship designs. The old man looked at me with a mixture of pride and terror, thrilled with the profits, but terrified I was going to bring the whole system crashing down. But I knew my limits. The Empress was a distant problem, best left undisturbed. I was content to be the local tyrant, the king of my own little sandbox, and, from time to time, to send a little reminder to the capital that I was still here. When a senator's nephew tried to seize farmland from local families, a signed confession and copies of the illegal deeds would mysteriously appear on the desk of an ethics investigator in Olympus. When Director Cross built a lavish new country home, the property was suddenly plagued by a series of unfortunate accidents, well-timed landslides, and inexplicable pest infestations. Of course, I would then charitably send a team of my own engineers to help with repairs, along with a hefty donation for his troubles. These incidents became local legends, further cementing my reputation as an eccentric and unpredictable force, which was exactly what I wanted. Everything was perfect until the day my pet lynx, a half-tame beast I called Red, trotted into my pavilion carrying a messenger bird in its mouth. The bird had a small copper tube attached to its leg. The markings on the tube made my stomach tighten. I dismissed the musicians and took the tube. Inside was a tiny, wafer-thin piece of silk. It was blank. Sophia, who had been feeding me cherries, looked at me with concern. "Ethan, what is it?" I held the silk over a nearby candle. The heat revealed 4 small words written in invisible ink. North. Rusht. Trouble. Urgent. The North meant the border territories. Rust meant weapons and equipment. Faulty ones. I crumpled the silk, my mind racing. The pavilion was warm. The sun was shining. The sounds of life drifted up from the lake. It was a perfect, peaceful day. Damn it. I tossed the silk into a brazier. Are those northern tribes getting restless again? And are the quartermasters in the army so corrupt they're issuing soldiers rusty swords? Sophia placed a cherry on my lips. "That's the government's problem, darling. You're retired. Have another cherry." I chewed the sweet fruit. You're right, you're right. It's just prices for northern furs and ginseng are probably going to go up. We should tell our buyers to be prepared. That afternoon, I announced I was bored with the peacocks on the estate and demanded that Franklin procure a flock of the rarest, most aggressive hunting falcons from the northern mountains. The kind that can take down a wolf. I declared, money is no object. Franklin bowed, a knowing look in his eyes. My hobbies were always so specific. Before the falcons could arrive, news began to trickle down from the north. The tribes had united under a new, charismatic leader. They were better armed, better organized. The Commonwealth Army was fighting hard, but was hampered by equipment failures and supply shortages. Reinforcements and fund from the capital were slow to arrive. The talk in the taverns and tea houses turned grim, but the war was a distant problem. In the Southlands, the looms kept spinning, the ships kept sailing, and the parties continued. My falcon collecting phase quickly gave way to a new obsession: antique jade. I spent a fortune buying up artifacts, real and fake, from every dealer and struggling scholar in the region. My warehouse started to look like a museum's dusty basement. No one knew that hidden within these acquisitions was a stream of intelligence. The hollow base of a ceremonial dagger contained updated maps of the northern border defenses. A porcelain vase was stuffed with profiles of the key army commanders, and a gilded statue had a secret compartment with partial copies of the army's falsified munitions inventories. This information flowed through my network, the antique dealers, the shipping companies, the theater troops, and was compiled by Franklin. From there, it was sent back north through different channels. Coincidentally, new supply depots and trading posts, funded by anonymous investors, began popping up near the army supply lines. Smuggling caravans started carrying not just luxury goods, but also high-quality leather, specialized lubricants, and medical supplies. It was all just business, of course. High-risk, high-reward business. Perfectly in character for a reckless playboy. The government, finally waking up to the crisis, tried to levy a war tax. The decree that arrived in the Southlands was harsh. The regional governor summoned me and the other local magnates to a grim meeting. I showed up in my most obnoxious crimson suit, fanning myself with an ivory fan. The governor read the decree, then looked at me pleadingly. "Mr. Thorne, your thoughts?" I snapped my fan shut. "The Commonwealth is in peril. We must all do our part. I, Ethan Thorne, will donate." I named a figure so astronomical it made the room gasp. "However," I said, tapping the fan against my chin, "all my liquid capital is currently tied up in various ventures. Will the government consider accepting a donation in kind? Perhaps a few of my textile mills and grain warehouses? I'll even offer them at a 30% discount on their market value." The governor's face turned pale. Everyone knew those were some of my most profitable assets. Offering them at a discount was a ludicrously self-serving gesture disguised as patriotism. But I looked so earnest, so proud of my own generosity. The meeting devolved into chaos as every other wealthy merchant followed my lead, offering their own convoluted, impractical donations. The war fund was a disaster. I left, satisfied. Back at the estate, Franklin met me. "Sir, word from the capital. The Empress is displeased with the results of the fundraising. Director Cross may be paying us another visit." "Let him come," I said, sinking into a chair by the hot spring. "This time, we'll play a different game." Speaking of games, I hear there's a legendary fish in the Great Lakes, so delicious it's a crime not to eat it. Arrange a trip, a big one. Let's invite everyone. Director Cross arrived sooner than I expected, and more quietly. He came disguised as a merchant, with only 4 aides, and checked into a modest inn in Viridia. On the day he arrived, I was hosting a massive banquet at the finest restaurant on the Great Lakes, celebrating a successful jade acquisition. I was loud, drunk, and showing off a piece of supposedly ancient jade to a group of fur traders from the north. Cross appeared at the top of the stairs, his face as smooth and cold as a tombstone. I pretended not to see him, loudly asking one of the traders, "Look at this craftsmanship. Isn't it magnificent? How many prime sable pelts do you think this is worth?" The entire floor had fallen silent. Cross walked over to my table. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice like cracking ice. "The soldiers in the north are bleeding and dying. and you are here, feasting and playing with trinkets. You seem to be enjoying your retirement. I squinted at him as if trying to place his face. Director Cross. What a surprise. Come, have a drink. The local fish is divine. He didn't move. I am here on the Empress's orders to investigate the matter of the war fund. I was told you made a generous pledge. Oh, that. I slapped my forehead. The pledge, right? I've been so busy with my hobbies. Well, you see, the thing is, I've spent a bit too much on jade recently, and the rest of my money is tied up in an overseas spice shipment. Perhaps the government would be interested in a few more warehouses. It was the same shameless excuse I'd used before. Cross's eye twitched. Mr. Thorne, he said slowly, the Empress is not in a patient mood. Your games may have consequences. Games? No games here. I slurred, looking deeply offended. I'm a patriot. I just have a temporary cash flow problem. It happens. He stared at me for a long moment. Then a strange, mirthless smile touched his lips. It seems, Mr. Thorne, that you are determined to defy the Empress. Defy? Never, I said, shaking my head vigorously. I'm her most loyal, if currently financially embarrassed, subject. This whole war business is really cutting into my leisure time. Cross said nothing more. He gave me one last, long, piercing look, a look of cold fury, but also of a strange, weary resignation. Then he turned and left. The moment he was gone, the drunken haze vanished from my face. I rinsed my mouth with cold tea. The show is over, I said to the silent room. Time to get back to work. Franklin, I called out, settle the bill, and give everyone here $100 for their trouble, for the stress. I stood, adjusted my crimson jacket, and bowed to my stunned guests. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Until next time. Outside, the sun was setting over the lake. Sophia was waiting in a carriage. I got in and took her hand. It's fine, I said, smiling. He's just an old dog with no teeth. Let's go home. I brought you the prize-winning fish. As the carriage pulled away, Sophia leaned against me. Will he be back? He came here to see if the nail that sticks up has rusted through. I said, he came to see if I was still sharp enough to be a threat. And he couldn't tell, I said, my voice light, but my eyes were cold as steel. Because I'm not sure I know myself. But he'll go back and tell Evelyn that I'm still just a drunk, reckless playboy who's more interested in his hobbies than in politics. I looked out the window, toward the darkening northern sky, where a real storm was brewing. Let the winds blow, I murmured. They'll find that even a playboy can build a damn strong wall. The carriage rolled on toward the warm, welcoming lights of Haven Springs. The game was afoot, and this time we were playing by my rules. The Playboy's war cross scurried back to Olympus, and rumor has it a priceless set of antique porcelain was smashed in the Empress's private chambers that night. The Northern War bogged down into a bloody stalemate. In the capital, talk of a negotiated peace, even a humiliating tribute, began to circulate. And in the Southlands, I fell gravely ill. Doctors came and went, all shaking their heads and prescribing rest and quiet. The official diagnosis was nervous exhaustion. Sophia made a great show of praying for my recovery. The gates to Haven Springs were closed. The story on the street was that Ethan Thorne had finally lost his nerve. With the Commonwealth weakening, the Empress would surely look for scapegoats, and the playboy who defied her was an obvious target. But in the secret chambers beneath my sick room, the lights burned all night. A massive map of the Northern Territories covered one wall, marked with enemy positions, supply lines, and terrain features. The northern garrisons will be out of food by the winter solstice. I murmured, my finger tracing a line on the map. I was pale, wrapped in a fur robe, but my eyes were sharp. Their western flank is exposed. We can move 80,000 bushels of surplus grain from the Southlands, ship it up the coast, and then inland by river barge. I tapped another point. Tell our assets in the Transport Guild it's time for that long-neglected canal to be miraculously dredged and reopened. Sir, my Captain Hawkeye protested. We're pouring our own resources into a mess the government created, and we're doing it in secret. We're not pouring, I corrected him. We're investing. Investing. Of course, I said, gesturing to a table piled with ledgers. The merchants in the West need our tea and salt. The army needs horses. The coastal shippers need capital. We will provide it all. We'll move our goods north, and in return, we'll get their horses, furs, and wool at bargain prices. As for the army, we'll generously sell them supplies at a modest markup. It's just good business. Hawkeye scratched his head. But sir, the tribes are in the way. Which is why I said with a fox-like grin, we need to encourage them to be elsewhere. I pointed to the locations of several smaller tribes who were rivals of the main warlord. What if a mysterious, wealthy merchant from the south were to offer these smaller tribes high-quality weapons for self-defense and enough food and salt to last the winter, in exchange for, say, relocating their camps or accidentally sharing some information about the warlord's supply routes? Hawkeye's jaw dropped. Sir, you're arming the enemy? Nonsense, I declared. I'm promoting internal tribal commerce and fostering regional stability. If they happen to use our peaceful trade goods to fight amongst themselves, that's their affair. The plan worked. While I recuperated, my shadow empire went into motion. The official government supply lines remained a mess, crippled by pirates and clerical errors, all orchestrated by me. But my private caravans, moving under the guise of commercial trade, began to flow north. The army started receiving desperately needed supplies, and the tribal alliance began to fracture, plagued by internal fighting. In the dead of winter, a messenger arrived from the capital. It was a direct, secret appeal from the Empress herself. The formal, sealed decree asked for my counsel on how to resolve a northern crisis. I received the messenger from my sickbed, coughing weakly. I am but a humble, dying merchant, I rasped. What could I know of war and statecraft? The Empress believes your unique perspective might be of value, the messenger said. I sighed, as if summoning my last reserves of strength. The problem isn't the tribes. It's the economy. War is expensive. Trade is profitable. Why fight them when we can? Do business with them. Business? Yes, I said, a flicker of my old self in my eyes. Open the borders. Establish official trading posts. Let them trade their horses and furs for our silks and tea. The government can tax the trade. The tribes get what they want without fighting. And if some tribes still want to cause trouble, we cut off their trade and empower their rivals. Use commerce to divide and conquer. The messenger listened, his eyes wide. It is just the rambling of a sick man, I finished, collapsing back into my pillows. He bowed deeply. Your wisdom will be relayed to the Empress. As the new year dawned, the war in the north ended. The government, following the advice of an anonymous but brilliant strategist, had negotiated a peace treaty based on opening trade. The border became a bustling hub of commerce, policed by a revitalized Commonwealth army and managed by a network of well-connected merchants. And then, another decree arrived from Olympus. This one was read publicly. It praised the patriotic merchants of the Southlands, led by Ethan Thorne, for their selfless contributions and innovative economic strategies that had saved the North. For my services, the Empress granted me an official title, Duke of the Southern Coast. I was made the Director General of all trade and commerce for the entire region and given the official role of Special Envoy for commercial pacification. In short, she had taken my entire shadow empire and made it official, legitimizing my power and making me one of the most powerful men in the Commonwealth. But there was a private, handwritten addendum delivered only to me. The messenger, a nervous young official, read it aloud, mimicking the Empress's voice, a voice dripping with sarcasm and barely concealed rage. My dearest Duke Thorne, it began, I know your ambitions do not lie in court, but in wine, women, and wealth. With these new titles, I expect you to take your duties seriously. Continue to manage your businesses for the good of the Commonwealth, and stop causing so much trouble. I am hereby granting you one final official title, Playboy Laureate of the Realm. From this day forward, your primary official duty is to be a playboy. See that you do it with a style that will be remembered by history. That is all. The room was silent. Franklin was visibly trying not to laugh. Sophia was hiding her smile behind her hand. I was stunned for a moment. Then, a slow, genuine grin spread across my face. I bowed deeply, my voice ringing with mock solemnity and pure joy. Please inform Her Majesty that I accept this sacred duty. Ethan Thorne, will be the greatest, most dedicated Playboy laureate this Commonwealth has ever seen. I will not fail her. The news was met with a mixture of shock, outrage, and ridicule across the land. But I didn't care. The ducal robes? I wore them once, then put them in storage. Too scratchy. I now had a title, an official position, and more power than ever. My business empire, now operating with the full sanction of the state, grew exponentially. The northern border trade, which I controlled completely, became a fire hose of wealth, flowing directly into my coffers and, incidentally, the Empress's treasury. The tribes were peaceful, the army was strong, the merchants were rich. And I, Ethan Thorne, Duke of the Southern Coast, Director General of Trade, Special Envoy, and Playboy Laureate of the realm, was lying on the deck of the most luxurious yacht on Lake Viridia, my head resting in Sophia's lap. An imported musician was playing a strange, beautiful melody on a harp. "My Lord Duke," Sophia teased, feeding me a chilled grape. "You are one of the great men of the age. Don't you think you should behave with a little more dignity?" I swallowed the grape. "Nonsense. I am a playboy. The Empress herself commanded it. I'm just diligently following orders." "But what if she decides she's had enough?" Sophia asked, her voice softer. "What if she tries to take it all back?" I opened one eye and looked at the spectacular sunset. Let her try. The entire economy of the Southlands, the peace in the North, the fortunes of thousands of powerful people. It's all tied to me now. If she touches me, the whole house of cards comes down. "Besides," I said, rolling over and burying my face in the soft silk of her dress, "you know what a playboy is? He's a man who understands one thing above all else: how to enjoy life, and how to make sure nobody, not even an empress, can stop him from enjoying it." The throne? My voice was muffled, but filled with pure, unadulterated contentment. "Hell, that's a real job. This," I sighed, "is living." The yacht sailed on into the twilight, a floating island of music and light. The Playboy's empire was secure. The Playboy's tribute. The ink on my ducal charter was barely dry, but the title that really stuck was Playboy Laureate. It became a running joke from the capital to the farthest corners of the Commonwealth. I leaned into it. I founded a new bank, the Playboy's Treasury, with a crudely drawn self-portrait on the banknotes and the motto, "Officially Sanctioned Fund." Evelyn had tried to tame me, to chain me to her government with titles and responsibilities. She wanted to turn the wolf into a well-fed, golden egg-laying watchdog. She forgot that a wolf in a diamond collar is still a wolf. My first official act as Duke, I hosted the first annual Grand Summit of Idleness, inviting every notorious degenerate, trust fund baby, and disgraced aristocrat to a week-long festival of decadence on Lake Viridia. The amount of champagne consumed could have floated a battleship. The official reports to the Empress probably gave her an aneurysm. My duties as special envoy, however, I took very seriously. The northern trading posts thrived under my rules. A 30% tax on all transactions. 25% went to the Treasury. 5% was a logistical management fee that went directly into my accounts. All transactions had to use banknotes from my Playboy's treasury. The finest horses and livestock from the tribes were requisitioned by my office for imperial use at a fair price, then discreetly sold to the army commanders at a tidy profit. The government's coffers swelled, the army grew stronger, the tribes were placated, and my personal fortune reached obscene levels. Everybody won, except, perhaps, the Empress, who was now presiding over a system that worked beautifully but was entirely dependent on the whims of her most hated subject. As the end of the year approached, it was time for the traditional presentation of tribute to the Empress. The whole capital was watching. What would the Playboy laureate send? A mountain of gold to prove his loyalty? Or a token gesture to signal his contempt? My tribute caravan left for Olympus with great fanfare. It was a strange procession of heavy chests, mysterious silk-draped objects, and even several large, heated wagons from which the sounds of animals could be heard. The tribute itself was, to put it mildly, unorthodox. First, 100 barrels of my finest Springs Folly bourbon, each one stamped with my ducal seal and a label that read, "A gift from one ruler to another. May it bring you joy." Next, 10 crates of live, freshwater lobsters from the Southlands, packed in seaweed, and kept alive on the long journey north. The attached note said, "A taste of the warm South, to remind your majesty of the peace and prosperity your wisdom has brought." Then, 12 life-sized silk tapestries, depicting the changing seasons in the Southlands, woven by the finest artisans in Viridia. The note, "A humble craft, to soothe the imperial eye after a long day of statecraft." After that came 8 magnificent, tamed hunting falcons from the northern mountains. The note, "The wild spirits of the north, now loyal to the Commonwealth, a symbol of our shared victory." Then there was a custom-made poker set, with ivory chips and a mother-of-pearl case. The note, "A simple game for moments of leisure. A reminder that even in the highest positions, one must know when to hold M and when to fold M." But the centerpiece was the last 10 wagons. Under the silk tarps were 10 massive, exquisitely detailed ice sculptures. They didn't depict eagles or national heroes. They depicted scenes of everyday life in the Commonwealth. Dock workers hauling cargo, merchants haggling in a market, farmers tilling a field, children playing in a street. Preserved by some secret alchemical process, they glittered in the winter sun. The final note was the longest, the lifeblood of the Commonwealth, frozen in a moment of time. A tribute not of gold, but the people whose lives are the true treasure of your reign. May it remind your majesty what it is you truly rule. The tribute was a masterpiece of passive aggression. It was simultaneously a gift, a flex, a warning, and a subtle lesson in governance. They say that when the items were presented, Evelyn looked at each one in silence. When she came to the ice sculptures and read the note, she stood there for a long time, her knuckles white as she gripped the parchment. Finally, she forced a smile and said, "The Duke is thoughtful. His gifts are accepted." A few weeks later, the Empress's return gifts arrived in the Southlands. It was a lavish collection of silks, jewels, and art, far exceeding the monetary value of my tribute. But hidden among them was a small, sealed lacquer box, addressed to me personally. Inside, there was no decree, only a single sheet of paper with Evelyn's furious, spiky handwriting. "Ethan, the bourbon was strong. The lobsters were fresh. The falcons were impressive. The poker set was amusing. And the ice sculptures were a very pointed message. Your sentiments have been received and deeply understood. Since you seem so fond of the Southlands, see to it that you take good care of them for me. On a personal note, the winter chill has been affecting my health. I hear the hot springs on your estate have miraculous healing properties. Perhaps you would be so kind as to lend me your finest geothermal engineer to construct a similar facility for me in the capital? Playboy laureate? Don't make me laugh. You are the troublemaker in chief. Watch yourself. I read the letter, and then I burst out laughing. She was furious, cornered, and utterly unable to do a thing about it. My tribute was unimpeachable. Her response was a masterful counterjab, a veiled threat wrapped in a polite request. I burned the letter. "Franklin," I called out, "select our best hot spring engineer, the one with the most skill, the tightest lips, and absolutely no knowledge of our most critical trade secrets. Send him to the capital with our compliments. Oh, and have our people in Olympus let it be known, very discreetly, that the key mineral for the hot springs healing properties can only be found in one specific, highly inaccessible mountain in the Southlands. It is, of course, exceedingly rare and therefore very, very expensive." Franklin grinned and scurried off. I stood by the window, the cold winter air on my face. Sophia came in with a warm drink. That tribute was insane. They say Director Cross almost had a stroke. "Good," I said, taking a sip. "His boss seems to have a sense of humor. I am, after all, just doing my duty as the Playboy laureate. By the way," I added, "after the new year, we're opening branches of the Playboy's treasury in the Northern Territories. And we're going to host a cultural exchange tour. Invite the tribal leaders down to the Southlands. All expenses paid. Show them our factories, our ports, our beautiful lakeside villas." Sophia looked puzzled. "Why?" "To show them what a peaceful life of prosperity looks like," I said, pulling her close. "To show them what they stand to gain by playing by our rules, and what they stand to lose if they don't. It's the most effective form of diplomacy there is. The Empress told me to take care of the Southlands. I'm just extending that care a little further north. It's for her own good. A stable border will do wonders for her stress levels. Sophia leaned against me, a smile in her voice. You truly are going to make this Playboy laureate the most powerful position in the Commonwealth, aren't you? Why not? I murmured, kissing the top of her head. She can have her throne and all the headaches that come with it. My philosophy is much simpler. Live well, and make sure anyone who tries to stop you lives to regret it. Outside, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall. Inside, it was warm and safe. The Playboy's reign was just beginning.